Elise, Devin, Marquise, Miranda, and Deja were early. I appreciate y'all.
You're welcome.
Corey, hey.
Yeah, actually, I think that could be good.
Hey, Zaya, Amani, Dennis, thank you guys for being so on time and timely. We're going to be able to really knock this out. It feels good.
Hey, Deanna. My dad just called me. He talked to the alderman, and we have some good news for up next about maybe partnering.
I love that. It's been a really good day.
Yes.
Hi, Dr. Ardy. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I am the co-founder of TrueStar, and so we're going to get started. I'm going to actually pass it off to Leah once she jumps on. So probably about a few more minutes, and then we'll get started.
All right, sounds good. And did you meet Wilnise Jasmine, Dr. Jasmine?
I didn't. They told me she wouldn't make it, but she's here.
Yes, I just logged on. How are you?
How are you? Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our young people who are like on time and just ready to go. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give it a few more minutes, and then Leah, whatever you're ready, you can actually get started. I'm gonna stay the host so I can watch the room and let people in. But I will let you get started because I know, everyone has a lot to do. It's busy times.
Yes, we have a lot to get into, and I know we're all very excited. So yes, I think that we can let any stragglers coming in, they'll definitely be able to just jump in wherever. They won't lose much of anything, but yes, it would be great to get started. So again, thank you everyone for coming today. We're really excited just to open this space where we can have these honest conversations. We can give you all some information, and everyone's going to leave really being informed. They have this information and these plans that they can implement in their own community and make their own decisions for themselves. So that's really what we want to instill just as we get through this teen hall. And most of all, we want to hear from you. That's why we really want to center it around these teenagers and really hear your voices and hear what you have to say, what your opinions are, what you've been able to put into action so far. So yes, so we do have an expert with us, of course. And so we would really like to just get this wealth of information. But before we get started with that, in the chat, or if you can use your reaction feature, if you would just let us know, I guess sort of we can't really do a show of hands as not everyone is on camera at this time, but could you just let us know maybe, I don't know, let's see, let's go for 2 people. Let's see if we could get 2 people, one person who has gotten the vaccine already and another person who has not. If you want to sort of sum up, let's say your reasoning behind that decision, and let's say 10 words or less, you can either think about it and then unmute after raising your hand and we can call on you, or you can drop it in the chat, but sort of summarize that experience for you and what your reasoning was behind that. We would just like to start off by hearing from you guys.
And real quickly, just for context, could you just introduce yourself and your role at TrueStar?
Yes. Sorry, I was so excited. I just jumped right into it. But yes, my name is Leah Ollie. I'm a senior at Whitney Young High School right here in Chicago, and I'm a part of our freelance writing team as well as the Youth Violence Prevention Program. I'm an ambassador for that program as well. So I do writing work with TrueStar, do a bit of creative work, working on ad campaigns, anti-violence training. And yes, go Dolphins. I see that in the chat as well. But yes, so I am really excited to continue, I guess, just in this work with TrueStar. It's been a great year so far. I started in September of 2020, and I'm loving it so far. So I'm really grateful to be here and really just to moderate this event for everyone. So I see an answer in the chat as well. Let's see, we have someone saying, I haven't gotten the vaccine because I really don't trust it and I need to learn more information about it. I'll take it in the future, but I don't want to take it right now. Yes, thank you very much for sharing. And we have another answer. It says, I got vaccinated for safety of public and family. Yes, those are great answers. So definitely on either side. It is great to be able to hear that from you all. So I guess with that considered, I know obviously we don't have time to do exactly a poll of the entire group that we have with us here today, but with that considered, I'm going to jump into some questions that we have for Dr. Ardy, which is really a great opportunity to be able to hear from her. So let's see, let's just say first.
One thing, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can everyone just put their age in the chat, and if they gotten a vaccine, just put a Y next to your age or no, in the chat. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. So as those come in, all right, thank you. So we will definitely keep that in mind as we take a look at this audience. So first to Dr. Ardy, I would ask you, could you just give us a quick rundown of, I guess, the bare bones first, what is in the vaccine and what does it do once we receive it, once it's in our bodies? Really, what is that purpose and what's in it?
Sure, absolutely. And first, thanks. I'm really looking forward to talking with you guys. I love talking directly to people, and I appreciate everybody kind of putting in the chat. If you haven't gotten it, you have got it, what you're hearing, what you're thinking about. I'm the commissioner here at the Chicago Department of Public Health, just for some context. So I've worked really across the whole COVID outbreak. I do a lot of Facebook Lives. So I'm used to taking direct questions, and I like taking direct questions. There's really nothing that you can ask that we're not willing to answer. And I just also did want to introduce, just before I start, Dr. Wilnise Jasmine. Wilnise, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and give your background?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Dr. Wilnise Jasmine. I'm a medical director of behavioral health here at the Chicago Department of Public Health. So I was involved early on during the COVID response, and I've been doing work now with trying to tell people about the background for vaccines. When I'm not doing COVID work, I work across 3 programs, our substance use programs, our violence prevention programs, and mental health programs.
Great, thank you. And so Dr. Jasmine and I are both medical doctors. So we both, have training in terms of talking to patients, answering lots of questions. And broadly speaking, when we think about what's in the vaccine, how does it work? First, let me just set a little bit of context, is that this is a vaccine that really came after lots and lots of years of research. Sometimes people think it was developed very fast, but it was really developed on top of a lot of years of research that had been done for some other coronaviruses. Even before COVID-19, there were other coronaviruses and some work that had been done. And so the idea of the vaccine, there's really not very much in it, honestly. There's instructions to your body to teach your immune system how to fight off COVID without you getting sick. So the way that it does this, you've probably heard there's the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine, and then there's the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And for people your age, or most of you anyway, the people who are under 18, the Pfizer vaccine is the one that's been authorized by the FDA at this point. And the way that one works is there's a little piece of, it's called messenger RNA. And I don't know if you guys have had the biology, but it's basically, it's instructions. It's like a recipe that goes into your muscle cell. It never goes into your DNA. Sometimes we hear that. It never sort of sticks around in your body. It's just around literally for a few hours, enough to teach the cells of your muscle how to recognize COVID, and then teach your immune system to fight it off. So besides this mRNA, which is the instructions for your cell to make the immune lessons, besides that, the only things in it are just things that help stabilize that. So there's like a little bit of salt, there's a little bit of sugar, and then a little bit of fat, just so that we can hold that little mRNA. That's the actual recipe. So there's not, we hear a lot of things and people have questions about other things in there, but there's really nothing in there except instructions and then things that help stabilize it.
Thank you. I know that broke it down for me for sure. Definitely hearing it in such a simple way definitely helps for me personally. And then I guess now we look at once we receive it, once we get those things in our body. I've heard a lot of varying experiences about side effects, about lingering effects. And for teens specifically, could you sort of let us know what might affect teens specifically? What if our group might be suffering specific side effects or any long-term things? Just what can we expect once we receive that vaccine?
Absolutely. Dr. Jasmine, do you want to start and I can jump in?
Yeah, so typically, whenever there aren't any specific symptoms that are specifically for those who are teenagers, just in general, when you receive the vaccine, some people, many people don't have any effects, but for those who do, some may feel some pain at the injection site and usually receive the vaccine in your arm, we call this the upper deltoid. Sometimes within 1 or 2 days, some people may experience feeling like they're feverish or sweaty. That lasts for a short while, like I said, 1 or 2 days. And some people, they may feel extra tired. And so they may want to sleep or just don't feel like doing their regular activities. Some may feel some generalized muscle aches. For those having those kinds of symptoms, taking Tylenol or ibuprofen may help with the symptoms. But overall, the symptoms are mild. And for those who've had severe COVID, the symptoms you get after you get your vaccine don't compare at all.
And I would add to that, thank you, that was perfect. I would add to that that we don't have concern at this point for any long-term side effects, because I heard you ask about sort of short-term and long-term. And one of the questions that I get a lot is, people wondering about, will this vaccine affect my fertility? Or, are there concerns about being able to get pregnant in the future? I hear that from men, I hear that from women. And there is no evidence that the vaccine in any way affects fertility. And actually, I think it's as a larger point, there are no vaccines that affect fertility or that have long-term side effects, because they wouldn't be approved. And so the way that these studies are done, and if people have questions about sort of how we know these vaccines are safe and effective, we can talk about that. The way that they're done, they compare, in the trials, these are volunteers who say, I'm willing to, help see if this vaccine works. Half of the people in the trial get the real vaccine and half of the people get a dummy vaccine. They get an injection of just salt water, and the person doesn't know if they got the real vaccine. The doctor doesn't know if they got the real vaccine. It's kept sort of by the computer. And then what they do is they follow these two groups forward and they compare, first of all, who gets COVID, is the vaccine protective, but they also compare side effects. And so this is how we know, which side effects are more likely to be from the vaccine, because, people will just have a headache on a regular day sometimes, regardless of whether they have COVID. But we do see people get these side effects. It's impossible to get COVID from the COVID vaccine. So they're not symptoms of COVID, but it's really the symptoms. This is your immune system sort of learning how to fight. And I would say we don't have there's in the trials, teenagers who've also volunteered to be part of the trials here, did not have different side effects than the adults did. And the only thing I would say is that people will have sometimes more side effects if they have, like, their immune system is really strong. So we see older people least likely to get side effects because their immune system is just not as strong. It's part of why they get sicker from COVID overall, but it also means when you teach their body how to fight off COVID, they don't get as much side effects. I actually didn't have any side effects myself. And there are some young people who have bad side effects. There are some young people who have no side effects, but regardless, they're just your immune system sort of learning how to fight. And they are, as Dr. Jasmine said, at least the way I think about it, the risk of potentially having short-term side effects compared to the risk of potentially having COVID, which, can be serious, especially including in younger people. That's where I kind of make that decision in terms of the risks and the benefits.
Absolutely. Thank you. That is really helpful to know. And I guess I would ask, just after we consider side effects as well, thinking about, I guess this is the last question that we had, sort of a big one before we sort of open the floor back to our teen voices as well, sort of just asking, does the likelihood of catching the virus decrease once vaccinated? Do we have any numbers we could reference on that, or just sort of how, if we're really going to weigh the pros and the cons, how much is it really going to help us to defend against this virus?
Yeah, absolutely. So that one also, there's two pieces of data that we look at there. One is, again, how well did the vaccine work in the trials? And remember, that's when we compare the group that got the real vaccine against the dummy vaccine and see how they did. And so in the first trials, again, we'll talk about the Pfizer one because that's the one, again, that most of you would be eligible for. Those first trials that were done basically found that people who were vaccinated were about 95% protected from COVID. So very, very protected as far as a vaccine goes. We think a good vaccine, a vaccine that's 70% protective or 75% protective is actually a very good vaccine. And this vaccine was 95% protective. And then actually in the trial that they did with the kids, meaning the teenagers, the 12 to 15, 16, 17-year-olds, in that trial, they actually, in the group that got the real vaccine, they didn't see any cases of COVID develop. Whereas in the other arm, they saw, I think, 16 or 17 cases develop. And so the vaccine is really, it's good. It's about 95% protective. And then in the real world, we've also seen, not only has it been protective here in Chicago, we looked at the data here. And for example, like since the vaccine's been available, we've had, so going back to sort of January, we've had more than 4,000 Chicagoans hospitalized with COVID, and 98% of them were not vaccinated, right? Had not gotten their full vaccine dose. And so, we've really been able to see how protective that vaccine really has been. I don't know, Dr. Jasmine, if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think you touched all the big points, but it's just, it's also important to know that the trials also protected people from being hospitalized or developing severe COVID. So in the trials, those who did develop, the very few people who did develop it, they weren't hospitalized.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that information. And I know we're seeing some questions pop up in the chat. So I guess as we look at, I'm seeing a lot of questions about the long-term future, talking about booster shots, talking about a third shot, just sort of as we look down the road in 6 weeks, 6 months, is my vaccine still going to be effective? Am I still going to be protected? Could you tell us a little bit about what the future looks like with current vaccinations?
Absolutely. Do you want to start here?
Yeah, so because this is the first year that we're using the vaccine, we really don't have a definitive answer as to whether or not you might need a booster shot. So that's something that we would have to follow through time. You may have heard of new variants, so different types of the COVID virus around the world being developed. As the new variants arise or as we become more aware of them, we test the vaccines that we have available to see if they're effective against those new variants. So overall, the vaccines that we have here are effective.
Yeah, perfect. And I would add to that, because I see this question, what about getting a third vaccination shot, et cetera? Right now, the good news is that all 3 vaccines that we use here in the US right now, the Pfizer, the Moderna, and the J&J, all of them are protective against all of the known variants. With some of the variants, you see that level of protection go down a little bit. So maybe it goes from like 90-something% down to like 70 or 80%, but it's still very good and it is protective. And it's been shown in the trials because they keep following people. They've continued to follow people over time and have found, for example, that the vaccines remain protective for at least 6 months after having gotten the vaccine. So they actually check people's blood and they look to see if the antibody, the protection levels are still good, and they are. And so it's not that they stop working at 6 months, it's that they still are good at 6 months. And that's how, they've been studied that long. And I saw this question about why hasn't the FDA given an official approval yet? And part of that was because the FDA actually requires to see that 6 months of data to make sure that there were no issues. And so now that 6 months of data has been collected, Pfizer is sort of the first one, has turned in all of that data to the FDA, and they are now doing a full review, of everything from manufacturing to short-term and long-term. And we expect that they will give the full approval of it when they're done with that review. That might come, if I had to guess, maybe in the September type range, just because there's a lot to look at. But it doesn't have to do with the fact, it just has to do with that you do want to follow, for at least that 6 months and really have that data. And so right now there is no plan. There is no plan for a booster shot. But like Dr. Jasmine said, if a new variant came that the virus was not, that the vaccine was not protective against, that would probably be the main reason why we would need to have a booster shot. And so the scientists have already done work to know, if we needed to do an adjustment or there needed to be a booster, we kind of know how to do the science to do that. And the way we are hopeful that we won't have to have a booster shot is by the most people getting vaccinated. Because when a lot of people get vaccinated, we have a lot of protection against all of the known variants. When variants come is when COVID spreads. And so if COVID doesn't have a lot of chance to spread, it doesn't have as much chance to mutate or to have a variant. So one of the reasons I encourage people, I know, people like you, often young people, you're not feeling like you're personally at a whole lot of risk necessarily. But one of the reasons why we very much encourage people to get vaccinated is that you also are sort of, you're protecting your family and you're protecting against the emergence of variants. So that's kind of a public health view of it, but that's one of the things we think about.
Thank you. That's really insightful. And I think that answered the questions that we had in the chat there. So I guess I would say as we move forward, and we will open the floor to more broader student questions as well, as we have our last sort of 10-ish minutes with you. But I would ask, what would you say to teenagers who are on the fence about getting the vaccine? What would you say just to inform them to make their decision?
I would say that when you were young, and there were a series of vaccines that you needed to take, like the measles, that protected you against the measles, that protected you against chickenpox. A lot of those vaccines were developed because prior to their development, these conditions that it protects you against, there were reasons why a lot of people, or humans in general, didn't have a long life. And a lot of these conditions would cause a lot of children to die. I see it as a reason to, if you bring it back to the COVID vaccine, if you get the COVID vaccine, it'll protect you from getting COVID, and also will protect those around you who may be vulnerable to getting really sick if they were to contract COVID.
Yeah, perfect. And I would add on to that, this COVID vaccine is how we get back to normal as a society. So the reason that we are in much better control than we have been in months from a COVID perspective is because, more than 60% of adults in Chicago have gotten that first dose, at least, of vaccine. And we're heading towards at least 70 and really wanting to go from there. The vaccine really does make COVID what we call a vaccine preventable disease, meaning a disease that can largely be prevented with a vaccine. And that turns this whole story on its head. When we didn't have a vaccine, really, you've seen, I'm sure there are people in your family and in your neighborhood, who have been really hit hard by COVID. And it does tend to be older people. I want to be clear about that, or people who have underlying conditions. But the problem is that, younger people can carry COVID and can spread COVID actually very well, very effectively, without feeling particularly sick. And so one of the reasons to do it is, to protect yourself, but also if there is anyone in your life who's older or who has an underlying condition, you getting vaccinated indirectly helps protect that whole community and helps really get us past this. We're going to keep opening, we're making really good progress, but you can definitely be part of this. We want you guys, back in school. We want you back doing your sports and doing the concerts and doing all of the things that we really, we all love, and but we have to be able to do that safely. And so when we were thinking about things like, bigger concerts and bigger sporting events, really the big question for me about whether this can happen, Lollapalooza is happening this summer, 100,000 people. The reason why we feel confident with that is, number one, it's outside. But number two, everybody's either going to be vaccinated or they're going to get a COVID test every single day to make sure that they're negative. And if you do that, if everybody's vaccinated in a group, there's almost no concern for COVID. And so, I absolutely, I really like the person who said, I'm not ready just yet, because that's actually where a lot of people are. And I think that's a good place to be, right? Like, you're not saying absolutely no. You're saying, I want to learn some more about it. I want to see people my age get it. I want to have some experience. And that's what we've seen a lot here in Chicago. We have done more than 270 million of these vaccinations now in the United States, and we've done 1.7 billion around the world. And, a lot of these. And we've done about 1.4 million right here in Chicago. And we've not seen problems, with safety, and we have seen very good effectiveness. So it's a good vaccine. Nobody likes to get a shot. I know it's not a fun thing to do, but it is something that will take that COVID worry off of you and off of your family and your community. And so that's why I would encourage people to do it.
Thank you for that information. And now I know we do have a limited time with you, so we really want to open the floor to students. So I did see a question that came up in the chat asking, why in the US, why do we have so many vaccines instead of giving more to countries like India, where I know there's a really large COVID crisis? If you want to get into a bit of how distribution is being decided in that way. And then also, if anyone else has questions you'd like to drop in the chat, we have 5 more minutes. And you can drop those, and then I will read those off, and we'll see if we can get those answered for you.
Okay, sure. I can start on that one, maybe. So, we think a lot about health equity here in Chicago, about pushing resources where they're most needed. We've certainly seen COVID hit not the same way across all of Chicago, and that gets amplified even more when you look globally. And I will say, here in the US, we are the wealthiest country in the world, right? And so the government here said, we're going to use all the resources that we have for this vaccine, and have, I'm very proud of that work, being able to develop this vaccine, make it available for free, no insurance, no copay, no questions asked. Like, how often can you get healthcare completely for free in the US, right? Like, this is something different. But I think this larger point of needing to vaccinate the world is a really important point. And so, what I would like to see, and actually the US has started the AstraZeneca vaccine, for example. We have a lot of it here. We don't need it, right? Like, we're having trouble giving away the vaccines that we have. And so the US has started giving some of that vaccine to Mexico and sending it to some other places. And I hope some more of that will happen. It's this fine line between wanting to make sure there's enough vaccine to protect Americans and wanting to share that. And so, again, for me, it's like, if we could just hurry up and kind of get the US vaccinated, we could sort of move on, but we have to make sure that, there is an opportunity for everybody here. So I share that concern. I have a lot of history with actually global and international health work prior to being in Chicago. And my biggest worry is the emergence of variants and how long it's going to take to control this around the world. But I also need to be selfish and say, I want to make sure there's enough vaccine for Chicago and everybody in Chicago. But if we can get Chicago well vaccinated, right, then we can sort of turn our attention elsewhere a little bit too.
For sure. Yes, and I dropped in the chat as well. If anyone has questions, you can unmute now and ask directly, just so you could get your voice heard, because we do have a short period of time here. We would love to be able to answer those questions, and then we'll also just continue this forum, just hearing from peers and everyone. So yeah, unmute if you have anything that you'd like to ask.
Aisha, you asked the question. Do you want to ask your question? Or if not, Ashley, go ahead and ask your question.
I was gonna say, does the vaccine react with any underlying conditions? Like, say you have, like, I don't know, anything, like, does the ingredients of the vaccine, like, react with that?
Yeah, good question. Dr. Jasmine, you want to start?
Yeah, I would say overall, no, that the vaccine doesn't react with underlying conditions. One thing I would bring up is that some people who may have had cancer or currently has cancer, when they receive the vaccine, sometimes their immune system isn't able to build up and recognize the component of COVID that the vaccine is trying to teach it. And so it's not a reaction, but sometimes it's not effective in people who whose immune systems are compromised.
Yeah, and I would just add that, like I sort of said at the beginning, there's almost nothing in this vaccine. The only thing that's in there is the instructions for your immune system to fight off COVID. So when I see patients in clinic and they have underlying conditions, if they have asthma or they have diabetes, I make sure to talk to them about the fact that their risk for a severe outcome from getting COVID disease is way greater, right, than somebody who doesn't have an underlying condition. And they don't have any risk related to their asthma or their diabetes from getting the vaccine. So for me, if someone has an underlying condition, it's an even more important reason to get the vaccine, because they're at a higher risk for having that severe outcome, which is the one we really worry about. Good question.
For sure, yes. Do we have anyone else have any other questions? Again, you can unmute or drop them in the chat and we can read them off for you.
I had a question, but I'm trying to think about it. So the mRNA, it's not carrying what am I trying to say here? The mRNA is a carrier for COVID or no? If you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, perfect. I love the question when people are interested in that biology. So the mRNA, the M stands for messenger, and it is literally carrying the message, the code to teach your cell how to make the protein to fight off COVID. So it does not contain any COVID. It doesn't contain live COVID, dead COVID, weakened COVID. There is no COVID virus of any kind in the vaccine. That was one of the really creative things when they developed this vaccine. They didn't have to give a weakened version of it. They just took the instructions and specifically, if you're interested, you've seen these pictures of what the coronavirus looks like. They'll draw these red spikes, right? It kind of looks like a crown. Corona means crown. That's where the coronavirus name comes from. And what it actually does is it teaches your immune system how to recognize those spikes. You don't have those spikes on the cells in your own body. And so if your body then sees a coronavirus with those spikes, your immune system then knows, oh, this is COVID, let me fight it off without ever making you sick. So does that make sense? And if you think, I don't know if you had this in biology, but the messenger RNA, it comes in, never goes into your DNA, never goes into your nucleus, doesn't incorporate it all into your genetics. It just teaches your cell, it kind of co-ops the cell to make that protein and teach the message. So it was a pretty clever way to make this vaccine.
That's pretty cool. And also that I remember my other question, the Johnson vaccine. I heard things about I guess this is underlying maybe too, but it was giving people blood clots, or people had a problem with blood clots with the Johnson vaccine. That's why they stopped creating it, correct? So would you recommend Pfizer instead of Johnson?
Yeah, good. And I'm glad you're paying attention to that. Dr. Jasmine, you want to start on that one?
Yeah, so with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, so there are 6 people who develop those blood clots that you mentioned in their brain. And once that happened, for the people, the federal government, they monitor how people are reacting to the vaccine. And so once they learned there were 6 individuals who developed these clots, what they did was asked everyone who had the vaccine to stop administering the vaccine, and then to look at those 6 people who had the clots to see if there was any other reason why they may have developed those blood clots. And so once they took the time to review those cases, they found that it wasn't necessarily due to the vaccine. And so to keep that in mind, it was 6 people out of 7 million people who received the vaccine. So about 1 in a million chance of developing the clot. And so that's why after they reviewed the cases, they were able to say, okay, everyone will make the vaccine available. That's still an option for you.
Yeah, exactly. And so they did, this is really, even after a vaccine is authorized and in use, there's a lot of safety monitoring that goes on. And if there's any signal, any concern, there's a lot of scientists really looking at this. And the decision to say pause on this was because they wanted to make sure they weren't missing a much bigger problem. Like, were there a lot of people getting blood clots that hadn't been reported? And then, literally this 1 in a million, it's sort of the chance of getting hit by lightning or getting in a car accident on the way to the vaccine appointment actually turned out to be higher. And so they did. It is available again, but it's only available for people 18 and over. So right now, the Pfizer is the only one that's available for people 12 to 17. I expect the Moderna actually soon will be available for adolescents. Their data also looks very good, but the FDA is still looking at it. But if you hear people getting the J&J, I think it is actually a very good vaccine. I recommend it. Where I've got patients who are really worried about, if they're especially worried about side effects or they're really scared about the vaccine, they just want 1 dose, I actually recommend the Johnson & Johnson vaccine for them because I think it's nice to just have one and done. But, but for me, whatever vaccine people want is like the good vaccine. So that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I'm 22, so.
Oh, perfect. So
Yeah.
you can get any of the 3 that you like.
Definitely.
Yes, we do have a good bit of our audience definitely in that group for sure.
Perfect.
Yes, and then one last thing, I know we don't want to keep you all too long, but we would ask, what advice would you offer to teens whose parents might not be giving them parental permission for the vaccine? How can they look forward to making that decision for themselves? Or would you have any advice for those teens in the audience as well?
Yeah, I can start on that one if you want to chime in. So because we're waiting for the full FDA approval there, right? And again, that's not because of any safety concerns. It's just they needed to wait the 6 months and have all the data to be able to look at. There is still parental consent that is needed for people who are under 18 to get that vaccine. Once the vaccine has that full approval, which will happen probably this fall, there may be the ability to for younger people to be able to get it. I don't want to promise that just yet because we're going to have to see sort of how that develops. But even more to the point, what I would encourage you to do, if you want to learn more about vaccine yourself, or if you want to, talk to your parents, et cetera, and you're interested, you can actually, there's a course through city colleges that was developed for people without a medical background here in Chicago who want to learn about the vaccine and be able to talk about it with others. And you do get a certificate at the end of the course. You don't get college credit, but you get a certificate. It's totally free. And it's, I'll put it in the chat, but it's ccc.edu. So citycollegeschicago.edu/vaccine ambassador. And it's an online, it takes about 2 hours. But if you're interested in sort of how to talk to people about it, or you want to learn more, that's one way to learn. Thank you. Other than that, there's good information, from the CDC and from the health department. But I think it's about just having, open and honest conversations. And I expect questions. I welcome questions. We know people have a lot of questions about it, and just making sure you're getting good information. But yeah, right now there is the parental consent that's required for anybody under 18.
Yes, and then let's say if we have any teens, I guess, on the call who are hearing this information and they think this is something that's really right for them. They're going to try and get an appointment. They really want to get this vaccine. What are some of the steps that they might go about doing to sort of obtain that appointment to make sure they really get that chance to get that shot? And also, how should they prep? Should we be drinking water, boosting vitamins? So what can we do as you look forward to that appointment and actually coming up to the appointment of getting the shot?
Mm-hmm. Dr. Jasmine?
Yeah. So the first place, if you already have a physician, you can make an appointment with your physician. Most of the outpatient clinics have the vaccine available. But we also have mass vaccination sites in the city. So you can go to the United Center. And also, if you go to the website ZocDoc.com/vaccine, you should be able to see different sites that have appointment slots available where you can sign up.
And the city of Chicago, all of the sites that we are operating, so that there's a number of them at city colleges, like at Chicago State, and others. All of them, you can go online. There's appointments available on ZocDoc.com, or I put chai.gov/COVIDVax is where you can see some more. But there's also about 50 events that are happening in the community just this week. So if you go to chai.gov/COVIDVax, you can see the whole range of things. We're at a number of schools, especially on Saturdays. If you've seen the vaccination bus out and around, all of the city of Chicago sites, you can make an appointment, and we love it if you make an appointment, but you don't need to. You can also just walk in and we'll do the vaccine. If you are under 18, you would need to have a parent or guardian with you. But pharmacies also have vaccine very widely available. So I put in the chat, the chai.gov/COVIDVax or ZocDoc, and you can go and you can make that appointment, and they'll tell you on those sites which vaccine is available, and you can make your choice there.
Thank you. Yes, that is great information that we've all dropped in the chat, and you should be able to reference at any point in time.
Do you mind if I add one more thing? Because I forgot to say this. I'm putting in the chat our phone number, 312-746-4835. That's the city of Chicago vaccine finder phone number. We've got people staffing that 7 days a week. And if you call that number, or someone in your family calls that number, we will help you figure out how to get a vaccine that sort of works for you. And if you've got grandparents or older people, anybody over 65 or anybody with a disability or a problem, you call that number, we'll bring vaccine to your house and actually vaccinate everybody at the house too, because we're really trying to get a lot of older folks vaccinated. So if you yourself want help finding a vaccine, or anybody who does, or you just have questions about it, if you call that number, there's people who will help you figure out, you say, I only want to do it on a Saturday between these hours in this neighborhood, and I only want Johnson & Johnson, they will find you a vaccine. So please do share that number. And if you do know anybody, even if you're still thinking about it yourself, and I hope this has helped encourage some of you to get vaccinated, but please, especially if you know anybody who's older with underlying conditions, we're especially wanting to make sure all of them also get vaccinated. We've been encouraging people to make it a family affair. So if you're going to get vaccinated, is there someone older? Do you have a friend, who might want to get vaccine? And one other just little perk that I forgot to mention is starting this weekend at all of the city of Chicago sites, anybody who comes to get a first or a second dose of vaccine gets a free Six Flags pass and up to 5 more for family. So if anybody likes Six Flags or that's a thing, there's free passes for people who get vaccinated here in Chicago. So that's another exciting thing.
Yes, that is certainly a perk. So yes, so with all of that considered, all of the great information that we have dropped in the chat, do we have anyone who has gotten the vaccination who would like to come off mute and really just share about their reasoning or their experience? Just tell us a bit of your story, why you decided to get it and how you're feeling now.
I'll go first. Oh,
you can go first.
Okay. So first, hi, my name is Jaden Stewart. I'm part of the freelance and super team, and my reasoning of getting the vaccination shot was just because, like you said, just to protect myself and others around me. It wasn't so much as peer pressure, but like my family members started getting it first, so then it was like, okay, I'm gonna just take it anyway, just to keep myself safe. So that's the reason why I got it.
Great.
Okay. Ooh, it's dark. I'm Alicia. I'm part of True Stars super team. So the reason I got it is because my family, because they were really getting on me to get it. And also my school is requiring that we have it for the fall semester. So it was like, all right. So I was like, yeah, I need to get it. And I don't know, my experience, because I just got my second shot Wednesday, It's like the side effects, I know they weren't as bad as other people's, but I had the chills that night and I knew something was off because it was like 70 degrees in my house. And I'm like, why am I freezing cold?
Mhm.
And then also like the next morning, I was very achy and tired the next day. But I was like, I know I don't have like the worst symptoms. I'll be all right.
Yeah. Did you take anything? I forgot to answer the question if you have to prep anything in advance. You don't have to prep anything in advance. You don't take any medicine. We encourage people to, generally have water, eat whatever you normally would. But if you do have symptoms afterwards, if you're feeling achy or you've got a headache, you can take some Tylenol, you can take some Advil, whatever you would normally take for that. How long did your symptoms last, Alicia?
The chills was just that night.
Yeah.
And me feeling achy was pretty much all Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Friday came, I was pretty much back to normal.
Yeah. And that's pretty typical for what we'll see. And, again, some people, when you get a side effect like that, if you're getting the chills or getting that, we know you've got a good, strong immune system that sort of learned its lesson well. So that's good. That means you've got a really nice, good level of protection. So I'm glad you're feeling better.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Aston. I'm 18, and I got both doses of my COVID shot. Like, as the second dose I got like one and a half weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
and oh Lord, when I get sick, I tend to have some extreme symptoms because I really don't get sick at all.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got my shot, I went home like I'm fine. Goes to bed, wakes up at 11 p.m. just struggling with a bunch of muscle pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot Advil existed for a moment. But in like a day or two, it eased up. And I'm happy about that because, vaccination. No more. I won't have to be like that if I get COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. And I saw Jaden put in, he didn't have any symptoms, but forgot to say. So it's highly varied in terms of what people have. And sometimes I get the question, people say, if I didn't have any symptoms, should I be worried the vaccine didn't work or my immune system isn't strong no, doesn't matter. You get your vaccine, you've got the protection. But when you get a lot of symptoms, you've got a good fighting strong immune system.
Yes, thank you for sharing. Let's see, I'm looking back in our responses in the chat from the beginning of the call. I know, let's see, we had Tati, we had Jade, let's see who else said yes, Owasada, Devin, Camille, and myself. So we had some other people who said that they have gotten vaccinated or they have gotten at least one shot so far. So if any of you who haven't shared yet, if you feel comfortable, if you'd like to unmute and share your experience as well, it'd be great to hear from you.
And while people think about that for a second, I just pulled out off our website here, like just to give you a sense, like on Saturday alone, for example, we're at Fenger High School, we're at Englewood STEM, we're at King High School, Carver Military High School, Clark High School. We're also at Gage Park, we're in Sherman Park doing Block by Block, West Garfield Park, New Bethlehem Church, Millennium Park, 63rd Street Beach, Jackson Park. So those are places that, like the vaccine buses, you can find all of that online. But we've got this list sort of every day, in addition to the fixed sites where we are, where you can sort of see the vaccination bus. So just to give you a sense, that's the kind of stuff that's online.
Yes, let's see, we have Tati in the chat. They shared that, oh, okay. And they said that they didn't have any symptoms, but after the first shot, that arm was sore for about 3 days. So yes, again, typical. And we'd also like to open it up for people who maybe have not gotten vaccinated yet. That obviously no judgment, just if you're comfortable, we'd like to hear your thoughts and hear your perspective as well. If you were on the fence or if you're leaning towards no, we would also like to hear that from you. So anyone who put no in the beginning of our first poll, or you're still thinking about it, or you were a maybe, we'd also definitely love to hear from you as well.
I'm skeptical. This is Miranda too, by the way. I'm doing some freelance journalism at work as well for your media, but I haven't gotten it just yet because I'm skeptical, and I was just more so waiting for different people in my family to get it to kind of gauge what my response would be. My family's not anti-vax, but my mom was definitely like more so a holistic healer approach. So I never got any flu shots. Like if it wasn't mandated for us to get into school, we never got any additional vaccines. So that's why I said until I am in a place where, say, like I'm working in an office or I am going to campus again and they mandate it, that would be my amendment. But since that's not happening right now and I'm fairly low risk and my elders are vaccinated, I haven't gotten it yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like, I always like it when people are sort of saying, I'm not getting it right now. I'm not getting it yet. I'm sort of, if this would be a circumstance under which I would get it. I think one of the reasons why schools do require a number of those childhood vaccines is just that, where we look at things like measles, diseases that used to really be very dangerous for children. They are almost eliminated at this point because of vaccination. And so, I don't know where the whole conversation will go in terms of requiring vaccine. Again, while it's under this emergency use authorization, that's not where it's going to be. But I think it's going to be something where increasingly for people who are not vaccinated, and just to be like the Chicago Department of Public Health, the government, the CDC is never going to require that everybody gets vaccinated. That is never going to be a requirement, just to be clear. But there may be settings that say, you've got to be vaccinated to do this, or potentially you have to test every day, like we're doing for Lollapalooza. And we'll see where some of that comes. But I think, I'm glad to hear that the older people got vaccinated in your family, and, depending how their experience was, right? So a lot of times people will say, I want to see folks around me get vaccinated. How do they do with it? And then I think, you want to see some more data, you want to see more folks get vaccinated. But this really, in terms of and I hear the natural thing too, this really is a very natural way. There's nothing else in it in terms of really teaching your immune system, your own immune system, how to fight off an invader. So I kind of think of that as, as opposed to like you taking a drug every day that is, putting something foreign into your body to fight it off. This is actually just giving your body instructions and using your own body's immune system to fight it off. So that's kind of how I think about it. But I'm glad thank you for speaking up. And, I hope folks in your family do well when you get vaccinated, and, maybe down the line you will.
Yeah, I'm not like my whole concept is, and I say it to like not be funny, but just like I think it's my normal tone of voice. Like I'm not the first in line to get it, but I'm not anti either. I'm just weighing it out.
Yeah. And that's so many people in Chicago are right there with you. Like that's really, when I'm out like at these clinics or with the vaccine bus, and talking to people, right at the beginning, there were a whole lot of people very, very anxious to get the vaccine, right? We were getting overrun with people. And now when we're out, it's mostly people, it's not so much people saying, I'm really scared of the vaccine or I'm super against the vaccine. It's really more people saying, I was kind of on the fence, or I've just been busy. Maybe I meant to do it. And because it's convenient and it's here, or I've had a chance to have a conversation, people will then sort of go ahead and do it. So every single day we're doing about 15,000 vaccinations right now every day in Chicago. And our numbers, they're ticking up more slowly than they were, but these are people who are a little more in the, I want to see with my own two eyes. And, I appreciate people who want to do that. I think it's about that movement from, having an open mind, I think is sort of the most important thing. So I think that's good.
Yes, thank you for sharing. Do we have anyone else who would like to unmute, or again, you can drop in the chat and we can read off any other comments that you have. But yeah, we definitely just want to hear from both sides, both perspectives of how people are doing, how they're making these decisions, their reasoning, how they're coming to the decisions they're making. So yeah.
Hello, my name is Jade, and I'm one of the people who did get vaccinated like a month ago. And I didn't have any like really bad side effects instead, just like the sore arm part. And the reason I got vaccinated was for traveling purposes. This summer, I planned on taking a trip to Cancun, Mexico. So that was my reasoning behind it.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Jade. I think, traveling is, I think, going to be one of the spaces that probably ends up with a lot of the most specific vaccination requirements, and especially international travel. Europe, for example, just announced in the last week or two that they are only going to let people in who are fully vaccinated. And so I think, you know, as this conversation sort of continues for people who are interested in traveling, and I don't know what that's going to look like domestically down the line. But again, you know, it's, no one's ever going to require, you know, make you do it. It's sort of to be in Chicago, but there may be things that people will want to do that it may be part of that. But I don't know for sure. We'll see how this all develops. So thanks for sharing.
Yes, and as we look forward to, you know, definitely just the future of travel and what it looks like, I know we had a question asking, how will we sort of prove vaccination? Should people show their cards? Should people show, I guess, how will that be enforced, I guess?
All over the country, people get the same CDC card. And when you get the vaccine, your information is in a secure public health database. It doesn't get shared with the federal government. It doesn't get shared with other agencies. It's really cut for public health. And it just keeps track of, you know, your basic information and which vaccine you got and the date and actually the vial of vaccine. You know, I think this is going to be an evolving space too. If you've got your card, that's good, right? Like hang on to your card. But if people lose their card, which we know they do, we have the ability to sort of pull down an official record out of that vaccine registry. And I think down the line, there will probably be some apps and things that can connect into that. And you'll be able to sort of show your own proof of vaccination if you want to. But right now, a lot of it is still kind of on the cards.
Yes, thank you for that answer. And I know we had an answer in the chat as well from Makai saying that, yes, Makai agrees with Miranda saying that, oh, yes, we do have a few other people who are definitely on the fence and just considering looking at testing and things like that. So not opposed, but this talk has definitely persuaded Makai. Thank you for sharing. So yes, that's great to hear. Do we have anyone else who like to share the reasoning on the fence? Anything? We definitely just want to hear from you all and hear where you're at in this time.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Makai. There has been a lot of misinformation, I think, especially on the internet. You know, there's people who are spreading misinformation that, you know, there's chips and the pregnancy, you know, a lot of things that aren't really true that can make it seem pretty scary. But where we look at, you know, there have been about 500,000 people, you know, have died from COVID here. And we've not seen, a vaccine would not be approved if we saw, you know, people dying from the vaccine. And so, you know, I certainly would absolutely not have taken this vaccine myself, and I wouldn't have recommended it for my friends and my family and, you know, the whole city of Chicago if I wasn't really, really confident in the science of how this vaccine was developed. Didn't skip any steps, the same way that all of your childhood vaccines were developed. This was really done the same way with that same monitoring and safety always first. So for me, 1.7 billion vaccines is a pretty good sign that you know, this vaccine is and without any signs of concerns for safety is a sign that it's been really a lifesaver.
For sure. And it's good to hear about those processes, definitely knowing that safety is being prioritized and the same processes that would be happening for anything else are happening now. So yes. And I do agree also with Miranda's comment that she shared saying that it's always good to be transparent and she'd rather stand fully firm in why she doesn't have it yet versus avoiding the question altogether, which is definitely good to hear as well. And yes, having conversations to really get to the bottom of that. And then we have a comment also from Ashley saying, my family hasn't gotten vaccinated yet, mostly because they're skeptical because of the Tuskegee experiment and the relationship between the healthcare system and Black women. However, Ashley is also considering getting vaccinated because this has definitely debunked a lot of the things that she has heard. So yes, thank you for sharing. We did have, I believe I actually got the chance to attend an event and write an article about this previously about vaccines in the Black community and how those bridges are being maybe repaired and how people are still definitely skeptical about the vaccine. So definitely, I guess if we would like to sort of get into that, and if we have any other comments just about sort of building that trust and how we can really make sure that this vaccine is safe for everyone, I think that would be a good closing note just as we wrap up and head towards the end of our time with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, thanks for that comment, Ashley. I think, you know, we want to be really honest about about things like Tuskegee and about racism in healthcare and not shy away from that, because it's real and it is absolutely something that people have experienced, and there's a lot of I think very earned mistrust where we're talking about the healthcare system, and or about the government or even public health. But I do want to first just reassure you that there have been a lot of safety and ethical protections that have been put in place. And so for this vaccine, all of the trials that were done in it obviously were volunteers and with informed consent, but also particularly here in Chicago, we did a better than average job of having a lot of diversity in the people who registered for the trials. So we had a lot of Black and Latinx Chicagoans volunteer to be part of that trial. And so in the studies, the scientists who were working on the vaccine knew that it was going to be important to make sure that this vaccine was, had that testing, in the trial, but also, that it would be representative of the United States. And so we didn't see any differences in how the vaccine performed across race and ethnicity groups, and we saw the same level of protection. But importantly, again, here in Chicago, I was really pleased that many, many people, with our clinical partners were part of that study. And the thing is, we've seen COVID hit communities of color, especially, Black and Latinx Chicago, much harder than COVID has hit white Chicago. And, there's a lot of root causes for that, everything from, access to healthcare to more underlying chronic diseases, to even things like, who's doing essential work, right? As we've been using this term, where housing might be more crowded. There's a lot of structural things to work on. And I would say as a society, we've got a really long way to go on that. But for me, we have seen higher vaccine uptake among white and Asian Chicagoans. And just to put some numbers on that, if you're interested, about half of all Chicagoans of all ages have gotten a first dose of vaccine, about 62% if we just limit it to those over 18. But if we just take the whole population, about half have gotten the vaccine. 56% of white Chicagoans and 56% of Asian Chicagoans have gotten that first dose of vaccine. About 42% of Latinx or Hispanic Chicagoans have gotten the first dose, and about 34% of Black Chicagoans have gotten that first dose. So there definitely is some gap there. And, for me, it's about really wanting to make sure that this vaccine is protecting all of Chicago, because what we're seeing right now is by far, because Black Chicagoans are the least vaccinated, we're seeing by far the most cases, the most hospitalizations, and the most deaths among Black Chicagoans, particularly on the farther south side, but also straight west. And I am hopeful that people will get get their questions answered, feel comfortable with it, because making sure that people in some of the neighborhoods that have been hardest hit are also protected means that, if we get another wave of COVID in the fall or in the winter, it's going to land on the communities that are less vaccinated. And I just really, really don't want this COVID to hurt Chicago any more than it already has. And I especially don't want it to hurt, some of the heavily Black or Latino communities that already have kind of suffered the most from COVID. And so certainly as a city, we've set a goal. We want at least 70% of adults to have gotten a first dose of vaccine by July 4th. And I think we may get there. We're getting close. But even more than that, I want to see, I don't want to see, the North Side and the white Chicagoans really heavily vaccinated, and the South Side, the West Side not vaccinated, because we won't get past COVID as a city, and we'll end up seeing sort of people, unfortunately, we'll see the burdens of COVID land even more on the communities that have already been hardest hit. So that's kind of my larger overarching goal. And, I think we've been trying to work with you know, physicians and trusted voices, you know, in the Black community too, talking honestly about that. I hope all of you, you know, will keep talking about this. I really, you know, want to thank all of you for your really thoughtful questions and conversations. And really enjoyed talking with you. I like hearing from people who are who haven't decided to get the vaccine, who are still thinking about it, or who have, because that is exactly the conversation that's happening in Chicago, right? Half of us have gotten the vaccine, half of us haven't yet. And you know, my goal is just to get us all past this, put COVID in the rear view mirror. And it is one of the best ways that we can do this as a community. So thanks very much for your attention. I hope it's helped reassure some of you with your vaccine questions.
Thank you, Dr. Arwady. We really appreciate, we know you have to be extremely, extremely busy and taking this time with our young people to get some of their questions answered. We really appreciate you and the Chicago Department of Public Health. And I really just want to say thank you, Leah, for moderating this, for doing such a great job, for running the room and managing the questions, and for all the young people we had, I counted about 25 young people who joined us today, who are all from the south and west sides of Chicago and from these different communities, who can now go out and give information that they learned today. So I really thank you. Miranda is going to be writing a piece for YR Media. We'll be doing something on the TrueStar platform as well to recap this session. So thank you so much for being a part of our teen hall.
Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's time.
Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.